Good evening, welcome to my Sacred Spaces vlog. I haven't done one of these videos in ages. I just have some ideas mulling over in my head and I wanted to share them. I've got one which I'll do now, and then I've got another one which I'll do a little bit later. But this one is the woman at the well in John 4. Last week I heard her preach. My friend preached in church and I went to go support her, and it was a really good preach and just got me thinking about some stuff as she was sharing the story in John 4, and she referred to some stuff in the Old Testament which I thought was interesting. I hadn't heard that before, or hadn't registered or clocked into that before. So last week when I heard it, it stayed with me, and I was like, wow, Jesus is pretty smart. Knew that already, but a few things. So the woman at the well, we know John 4, she goes midday because she's kind of an outcast in society. She's labeled a sinner, unclean, unworthy. She goes midday to draw water in the hottest part of the day, and she meets Jesus, and she has this very interesting encounter with Jesus. The first thing I wanted to say though is because when I was listening to it 2 weeks ago in church, I was like, the story is recorded that Jesus was at this well with this woman, but it seemed like it was only Jesus and the woman at the well. But then the story is recorded, so who was there to record the story? Or did Jesus go and tell Matthew? Or so this is in John. Did he go tell John what happened, and then John wrote it down? Just took Jesus' words and wrote it down? Jesus could do that. Trustworthy guy, tells a story. He says, I want this to be in the Gospels, I want this to be in the accounts that you're writing about me. Maybe Jesus did that. Maybe the woman found John at some point and retold the story, and John got word of it and put it in his Gospel. But I just think about it, no one was there at the well, so where does the information come from? And that's a question I have. I don't have a particular answer. But then I thought about that, the whole thing about questions and faith. I don't have all the questions when it comes to my relationship with God. I don't understand everything. The Bible is a lovely book, but it's also so confusing sometimes, so full of contradictions. But I kind of thought about all these questions I have. It doesn't stop me from having a relationship with God. It doesn't stop me from being in a relationship with God. And I feel like I might have all these questions like stuck to me, but I still come to God and know that I know enough of who God is. I've experienced enough of who God is in my years as a Christian that like I'll cling on to him, and despite the questions. And I have this cool little imagery. If this piece of paper represents all knowledge, okay, in the entire world, all the answers to all the questions that everyone had, say my knowledge came to just that little amount of the circle. So like Daryl just knows a little bit. That might be even generous in the whole world's knowledge. But say this is all I knew. The cleverest person, Einstein, might know like a lot more. Don't even know he was the cleverest person. But I only know this amount. But doesn't mean from here to the end that those questions and unanswered questions, the things I don't know, I must just give up now because this is all I know. Like there are answers for that. God holds all the knowledge. God holds all the answers in his hand, and I can kind of trust that. So I kind of thought that, we always had these excuses like, where did dinosaurs fit in, and all these questions. There might be answers. We might get answers that help us and we got clear understanding, or we don't. But like, because I don't have answers, I'm not going to throw the whole piece of paper away. I'm not going to throw the whole thing, throw the towel in. I'm going to trust God knows everything. He's got all the knowledge. I don't need to know. I'm on a need to know basis, really. And I'm happy with going, God, maybe as years go by, this circle might grow a little bit. I might know a little more about God. Don't know. But I know enough to keep me going, keep me in my relationship with God. So that was one little thought. Back to the woman at the well. I thought of that. So it's so interesting because in the preach, my friend who preached said, I'll read it. I'm going to move over here quick. So the encounter, Jesus is asking her to draw some water, and then he says, I'll give you water that's living water, which is such a cool thing. you would have asked him, he would give you the living water. Like God just gives us a water. He quenches our thirst. We all long for some. We long for something, and God is that longing our longing can be fulfilled in God. Our thirst can be quenched in God. But a little further, verses 17, 18, Jesus said to he told her, go call your husband and come back. And then she responds, I have no husband, she replied. Jesus said, you are right when you have no husband. The fact is you've had 5 husbands, and the man you have now is not your husband. What you have said is quite true. So the woman said, I see that you're a prophet. And so that's a little encounter. And it's like quite an interesting thing. And apparently, and you look it up, this is what I heard in the preach, and I've also looked it up myself, is the 5 husbands actually represent the 5 people groups brought in by the Assyrians, brought into Samaria, and the whole emphasis Jesus he's trying to tell the Samaritans about their spiritual adultery with the false gods. When these Assyrian people brought in all these 5 people groups into Samaria, they were intermingling, they were worshipping false gods, false idols, and they kind of turned away from God. And God's saying, you Samaritans have been part of a spiritual idolatry. You practice spiritual idolatry. And so it was interesting, because when I first heard that, it's like, that's so cool, because Jesus is saying something like so profound to her. But then I thought, maybe I don't know anything about this woman, but did she have that kind of knowledge of the Old Testament and the history that she come from? Maybe she did, but maybe she didn't. And this is the fascinating thing for me. If she was just like a common person like me, it would have been taken just for the moment. Jesus was just saying, I know about your life. I know you. I know you've already had 5 husbands, and the man you're with is not your husband. And take it at plain face value. It's for her in that moment. It's about her personal adultery. Personal adultery. Yeah. But she's had 5 husbands, and he's challenging her and calling her out. And that's just in the moment. But then at the same time, Jesus is transcending that moment with a woman, and knowing that this story will be read in years to come, will be preached in years to come. Here in 2025, whenever that happened in AD 33, 32, whatever, now it's being preached in 2025, and Jesus knew in that physical moment that the passage and that encounter meant something for her. And then also Jesus transcends time, goes into the future, and says, one day this will be preached about, and there'll be a link between the 5 husbands and also the 5 people groups that came into Samaria. And isn't that mind-blowing, that Jesus can have an encounter and be right in the encounter, in the moment, and then he can transcend time and be elsewhere, like there's going to be a preach about it at a later stage. Bam. I just think that's good. Man, that's good. Anyway, so I'm going to stop there. If you watch all of this, kudos to you. Thanks for watching.